Hello, welcome. Hey, Jen.
Hi, Tamara.
We are here for our weekly HR huddle and excited to be with you today. And we're both remote. We're always remote, but we're actually in different locations doing this today. So Jen's at a conference, and I'm sure she'll share some insights because she was with some HR professionals. And I continue to be in and out of Iowa doing my remote work at my daughter's. And so we're excited to be with you guys today and talk about some maybe some strategies and some things that we're seeing around turnover, and partly, who can we be as HR professionals, and who can we encourage our leaders to do be in the face of turnover? And we're seeing turnover. Turnover is up. And so we just want to acknowledge that. And so also, what we can do to maybe support our team, support the person that's leaving, have it be a smooth transition, minimize some fear or concern because we're already squeezed with capacity. So we just had some ideas that we thought, we would explore with you on that. And so I started with turnover is up, and we think some turnover is good. So we're not trying to say we're going to ever eliminate, or that we would want to eliminate turnover, but we're approaching 20, 25%, depending on, where you're looking, what size of firm. And we probably need to be more around the 10, 12, 13%, somewhere in there, normal turnover. So we do need to figure out how we can reduce it. We've been talking about the Great Resignation, and, there's some things that we've been talking about, to help create that stickiness, make some changes, stay interviews, those kinds of things. But when people do leave, and they're choosing to leave, who are we going to be about it? How are we going to handle it? How do we make that transition, real? Sometimes we do have to ask people to leave. I think we've talked about that too, but we want to talk about, some steps or some things that we could do, and, who we can be in the face of that.
So, Tamara, I'm jumping in.
Yeah.
And, yes, people will leave us. I agree with you. 10 to 12% turnover, probably healthy, solid. Up to 15% we could live with. Anything over that, big problem. Super expensive. In the past, SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, has put the cost of turnover anywhere from 2 to 2.5 times a person's salary. That's the cost of replacement, the cost to find their replacement, the cost to train them up, 2.5 times the person's salary. So the cost is high, and that's before you add in goodwill, the issues of clients being bummed that you appear to be losing people, or team members being demoralized or disappointed to see people they care about go, or people that are helping relieve the pressure on them leave. And so there's a very high cost to this turnover. And obviously, we want to do things to engage, motivate, and maintain our workforce. But that, I don't think, is the subject of today. That is we've talked about it some. We'll talk about it more. Today is, okay, someone's leaving. What are we going to do about it? And one thing I do want to suggest is, because we know even in small companies like ours, people do leave now and then. We have to do kind of a big company thing that none of us wants to do. And that is, we should recognize that there are things we do every time someone leaves, whether they quit us or whether we have to ask them to leave. We have to change passwords, for instance, if they had access to certain passwords, or we might need to collect key cards if they had access to a physical facility. Or employee badges, or any of those sorts of physical things they may have in their possession. If we own the equipment at their house and intend to get it back, we may need to get some of that stuff back, or we certainly need to get their laptop back, and have it wiped and repurposed, make sure that the important assets on it are backed up or stored where they're supposed to be. There's a bunch of stuff like that we do. We do COBRA paperwork, and all of us are, listening to this and thinking, yeah, we get it. Well, not everybody has that process documented in a simple checklist that you can then whip out and say, okay, we're going to cause this person to leave. Let's prepare for this checklist. Or so-and-so just gave their notice. Let's begin figuring out who's doing what and by when on the checklist with the person who gave notice. So that's one sort of tactical, technical, simple thing we need to have. But it isn't that simple, because we run into this exit checklist missing thing a lot with clients, and they scramble, and we end up looking a little disorganized and maybe exasperated and disheveled and nutty while we're trying to slap together the departure instead of having it feel orderly and professional and well thought out and structured and covering our risk, but also making the departure feel ordinary or regular and not like mayhem or chaos.
Well, and when it feels okay, it helps the managers, whether that's a partner or manager title, but the people that are managing that person, plus the team around them can see that order, and it helps them feel okay or better about the process instead of it's like, I don't know what we're doing. And did we think about this? And did we think about this? And everything's last minute. And it's like, whoa, we're in trouble. So it could, instead of leaving that feeling of panic, which some people could be in because now I also have to figure out how to replace this person and how do I reassign work or what do we need to communicate, to clients, et cetera. So I think it's important to have that process and make sure your managers know what that is and know who to talk to access it when they need it, help walk them through it. And then I just said communication. And I think that's another piece that's really important for us, to talk about. And it starts with, okay, we receive notice. Now, what's the messaging and positioning out to the team and who do we tell first? And we always try to ask the person to, say, this is what our messaging is. And we would like you to be silent until we, figure out the communication and tell the appropriate people. And that takes a day. It's not like we're asking them to hold, a long time, but we would like some consistency in that positioning, in that messaging. And if it's somebody that, we believe is going to be okay in transition, if they gave 2 weeks notice or if they gave till, I know some people have given like till after October 15th. So they're going to be here for a couple months. We want that to work out well, but that communication and figuring out what our messaging is really important. And then think about the cascade of communications and, telling the leaders, telling the teams that are most impacted, then figuring out a client communication if, clients are impacted, but, thinking through that. And then again, coordinating that with the team, I think is critical to make this feel smooth for people.
And Tamara, it's a change communication. What we're communicating is, so-and-so is leaving, that's a change. And so we should manage it just like that. What's our positioning? Who needs to know in what order? How will we tell people? Who needs to hear it face to face or who needs to hear it in email or, and not telling clients before we tell internal team members. We hear stories sort of like, I don't know, tribal, war stories or something that get handed down, from generation to generation of, my firm, when people leave, they just disappear, like they're gone, they vanish. They're not on the firm directory anymore. I can't reach their extension. I go by, their desk is empty. Nobody said a word. That's outrageous. And I hope that's just folklore and not the truth. But I do know that some leaders feel so awkward about it all that they don't communicate transparently and they don't communicate sort of above board or soon enough. And they let the grapevine take over or, the court of public opinion or whatever you want to call it. They say in the absence of information, people make up their own. And it's almost always negative. And so if we leave a vacuum of information, we risk that the grapevine will generate some negative story about it. Now, that said, whatever our positioning is on someone leaving, it can't be fake, right? It has to be the truth. And they have to agree to the positioning, incidentally, since they're the one giving their notice. So they're the first person we're going to discuss that with.
Right.
But, and we're not trying to sugarcoat it. We're not trying to put some icing on it, or give false reasons or any of that stuff. We just want to say, well, what are we saying about so-and-so leaving?
Right.
And right now, we know some firms are seeing a number of people leave and they're leaving in quick succession. Then we probably aren't going into as much depth about each departure, but we are going to need to acknowledge the string of departures at some point. Everyone else is noticing. So for you not to mention, we are experiencing some unusually high turnover right now. We plan to have some focus groups to see what we can do to slow this down and improve the conditions for those, that are continuing to build a career here. to solidify our workforce or whatever the positioning is, we have to say something if it is in fact looking like a bit of an epidemic. And we won't use that word, by the way. That's my word to you. But and sometimes turnover happens like that. Marketplace can cause sort of a bunch of turnover at once, but also sometimes something happens in the life of the firm that can create an uptick. For instance, maybe we merged in a group and they came in and we might not have had a perfectly great cultural fit. And some of them have been struggling and one finally leaves or we help that person leave. And then maybe some others say, this is my exit. I see the door and I'm headed out. And we might have a group, sort of a cluster of people go because they were all connected or because of, just some circumstances like that. Occasionally we see a new leader come into a group and they're recruited maybe from the outside or promoted from somewhere else and they're not necessarily part of that original group. And it may or may not go well, that new leader and the meshing of the rest of the group. And sometimes we see that be an impetus to drive a cluster of turnover. So whatever the reason, what we need to do is not pretend it's not happening.
Right.
Because the rest of the group of people left, and I'm going to use another term we won't use outside of our little HR huddle circle, is the survivors, the people who survived the departure. They need to be managed and supported and uplifted and heard so that they can feel like, hey, I am fine with my decision to stay. I feel like we will succeed as a group. I feel like my leadership is on the right track. And if they don't feel like that because we're being silent, we're not managing the message, or we're making people wrong who are leaving, which could happen, then we run the risk of chasing more people off, sort of allowing the problem to magnify. And maybe you want to step in there on that make wrong idea, Tamara.
I was right there with you. So I think that that's something for us to look at is, who not to be in the face of receiving somebody's resignation or a string of resignations, because we could just say, well, that person wasn't a fit, or they didn't do X, or I saw the writing on the wall, or we bent over backwards. Like we say things like that, that really is, about them and pointing fingers at them. And maybe some of that's valid. Maybe there are some things, but that's not the right, again, positioning or the right mindset to be conveying to others. And so we have to be really careful about that. We could put our hands on our hips and be, kind of right in their resignation. And I think the other thing that we have to be careful that we also don't do is make sure that we don't, justify and say, well, they didn't go to another firm, they went into industry, so then it's okay. Instead of saying, what changes could we make, or what could we do better, or where did we maybe not have enough information to say what could we have adjusted in time. But I think we make some justification sometime to make ourselves feel better a little bit, but also in the spirit of I want to make my team feel better. But it doesn't make our team feel better. They are wondering, well, should I go to industry then? Or should I go to a different firm? Or, they start questioning it. So we have to say, right where you were, I think is, be careful that we're talking about what can we do so that they are solidified in their decision to say they feel good about it. They see change happening. If they feel heard on any requests that they might have. But I think that's one of the things about, who we're being is really important in the face of it. And that does affect our message. And we want to wish people well. We want them to, have success on their, next endeavor. I think we always say that, when we have somebody that leaves. And even if it's not, as, perfect of a situation of them leaving or not, we've had some people really, gosh, we just love them and we wish the world for them. And then others said, it's like, okay, this probably was for the best that they left. But I want them to be successful and win. We always want them to win somewhere else. And so for us, that's an authentic message that we would, give. And so, conveying that and, finding your way to express it, I think is super important.
Yeah, and I think we all, we believe at least at Convergence that everybody's on their path and journey, and they are guided. We have to be 100% responsible for not pushing them out of our firm, not nurturing them. We have to nurture them. We have to support them. But sometimes people need to leave to go find out what's next for them. And they wonder, and you've tried everything and they're going. We need to just be as cool as we could be about anybody who leaves our firm. What we want, at least my opinion is, what we want to be is we want to take the highest road that's humanly possible, the supportive road, the I want you to win road, the let's depart clean, let's leave the bridge intact, let's not talk negatively about anybody as they depart or after they depart. Let's just be cool about it and gracious. Try to have grace and humility and yes, if it leaves us vulnerable, yes, if it leaves us concerned about something, it's okay to acknowledge that, especially with your fellow leaders, to say, man, this hurts and I'm concerned. But it is not okay to run people into the ground or to, grab them figuratively by the scruff of the back of their shirt and run them to the door. Now, yes, if you found somebody doing fraud or whatever, of course, we're gonna cut off their access to systems and do some things that are a little bit radical. But for the most part, our people are good and should be trusted. Just because they're not going to work for us in a month from now doesn't mean we want to give them sort of a poor send off, leave them with a bad taste in their mouth, and leave our people who are watching. They are watching, who are you?
Right.
And what kind of a person are you? And what kind of a leader are you in the face of difficult situations? You get a chance to shine, or you get a chance to, step in it. And we would like to avoid stepping in it if we could help it.
And I think it's also important, as people are watching you, to see you build a checklist for transition. Again, so we have clarity about what is going to happen with that person's stuff. And so that there is a smooth information sharing and information, baton passing, I guess. And I think that's one of the things that we would go into immediate action on. And maybe it's part of the communication plan. It's not an external communication plan, but what's the stuff you're working on? What's the status? And what's going to get done before you leave? And that's going to vary depending on how long, they notice they gave you. And then who is it going to? So that then we can tell the other people that, and they know where their stuff is going. And I think that's really important. And I think it does help, people understand on your team what to expect and what we should plan for. And so, figuring that out and figuring it out with that person as soon as possible, because they can impact it. And if we're being integrous in our relationship with them, we're being empowering and uplifting and wishing them well, they will likely respond in turn. And I think that's important also. The person that's leaving is going to mirror who we're being. And if we're going to be grouchy or indignant or make them wrong, they're probably not going to be as cooperative. And so that's the other reason to pay attention to that, is because we do need some help with that transition. It does make a difference when we can, to have that be as positive as possible.
For sure. And I think that it'll help us feel better for it to be positive too. We want to feel good about the way we complete with people. We don't want to leave relationships unraveled or fractured or, on a sour note. It's not good for your soul to do that. It doesn't help. And discouraging other leaders from doing it too. If you're in a large enough organization, you might be listening to this and think, I would never do that. Well, maybe we need to teach this as a best practice for all those involved in exits, so that they understand how important it is to complete powerfully and positively with people. And, our former partner, Jack, used to say that when somebody quit at the Big Four, all of a sudden the partner would race out the door basically and meet him in the hallway and say, we're so sorry you're leaving, but now you're probably becoming a client. Let's go to lunch. And we always kind of grossed out on how that, that the idea that I'd suddenly pay attention to you once you're leaving because you might become a client. Well, I do want to point out that people leave and they go in the marketplace and they talk about us.
Right.
They talk about our organization, whether they're at a client or whether they go to a competitor or wherever. And what you want is them to say, wow, they were really professional. And they treated me really well on the way out, and I have nothing but good to say about them. Today at lunch, I saw a young man at this conference who a week ago was employed by a client of ours, and this was his first debut in the new competing CPA firm that he worked for. And when he came over, we talked a little bit about his transition, and he said, I have to tell you, I love these guys that I left. I loved them already. The way they handled my departure, I love them more. They wished me well. They promised to stay in touch. They treated me well on the way out. They encouraged me to communicate that I was leaving and where I was going even. He just was really like, this was a class act, like they always were already. But at the end, when I had to make the difficult decision to break up with them, who they were was as loving and as wonderful with me as they were from the first day. And that's what you want. In the ideal scenario, that's what we should be striving for as leaders.
Isn't that great? And like you said, that gets out there in the market. And that's who we want to be known for. We've been talking a lot about culture, and that right there is part of who we are and what our culture is and what our people can count on, what our clients can count on. And when they see it demonstrated and modeled, it goes a long way. I think the other thing on the way out, is exit interviews. And I think most firms probably do exit interviews. And we would try to, get as much specifics as possible because we want to improve. And so I think that's the one thing I would say about exit interviews is the setup, and that I want information. I would like your feedback because we want to get better and we want to understand what that is. Now, you could argue that we should already know why they're leaving or what's not working because we've already been checking in with them, and we were doing stay interviews instead of exit interviews. We were doing huddles with our career advisors, a lot of the things that we've been talking about. And so it could be frustrating for somebody that's leaving if there was a reason or cause. Now, sometimes I'm leaving because there's an opportunity and our firm just doesn't have it, and that's what makes sense. Or we're leaving, and I hate to say this because of geography, and I hope in remote we're not doing that anymore. But there might be some other reasons that I don't have feedback for the firm, or if I had to give some feedback, here it is. But I think it's important to ask. And I think the context or the setup is important to say, we want to get better and we value it. So if you have any feedback, and then whatever your specific questions are, make sure we do that. But the setup, I think, is important.
Well, and Tamara, I think I would have a peer conduct an exit interview if it were me. I would not send them down, down to HR.
It's like the principal's office.
Sending them. HR feels ominous. HR might be responsible for, helping me with my exit paperwork and stuff. I don't want to burn any bridges. I don't want to wreck my reference. I probably won't open up to my direct manager, but maybe I would if a peer did the exit interview. So that's something I think we should be thinking about as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. So, look at how we're handling these transitions, resignations. They are going to happen. I know we're working on what we can do to increase retention, but when we do have resignations, it's super important on how we are handling it. I love the idea, Jen. Maybe we should do some training on this. We should talk to our leadership team about how we should, what the process is for sure, but also who we should be being, and that we want to lift people up. We want to wish them well, and what the steps are we can make that transition for our current people, our existing people, as smooth as possible. Be positive, be hopeful, and then I think that works better. So something to look at, and hopefully you got some ideas out of this. We would welcome any other strategies that you're using. Let us know. Otherwise, we will plan to be with you again next week, and we hope you have a great week. Thank you very much.
Bye, all.